Burlington has a 2-year college degree. You can look at, there would be your middle skilled jobs. Now, we need to make sure that we continue to produce those produce the qualified applicants to fill those jobs. Because there's a couple of interesting statistics that they just come out with. The Federal Reserve Bank of Boston come out and said that we have one of the most aging population of workers in the country.
Okay.
If you exclude Boston because of the young workforce in the high-tech industry in Boston, we're the 4th highest age workforce in the country.
Oh, wow.
We're going to need to replace the workers, the baby boomers that leave and are leaving the workforce with qualified workers. We don't have the qualified workforce to replace those workers at this time. And we're going to need to do something about it. This was a report that just came out with the Commonwealth Corporation and the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston. So again, it's important for my district because we need to make sure that we have that workforce for the companies in Burlington to continue to prosper. In Billerica, in Lexington, in Woburn, and for a little bit less so in Arlington.
Yeah, I know I ride the bike path a lot, and particularly last summer, I haven't started yet, but I've noticed a lot of the companies that are on the bike path, they seem to be companies that were middle tech companies, as I would have called them, in the sense of they were like iRobot, they're producing something, but they're also they're strong research entities as well. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and he said he went to pick up his girlfriend, and there they were playing with a robot out in the parking lot, and so the technical ability to develop and produce those robots, and I've seen their website, and some of the stuff on their website is quite significant. So you have sort of a dynamic variation within one company, and they need those workers, and if they don't have the workers, what do we do?
Yeah, that's right. And if you look you see what's going on in Kendall Square. They just they're doing a large build-up in Kendall Square, and they're actually using office space for reduced price office space for startups.
Oh, wow.
So what they want is the students that have graduated from MIT to be able to develop and do their research and develop and do their startups, because those startups end up moving into places like Burlington and Lexington and produce work and actually generate a pretty good workforce.
Yeah, I've seen how much money some of them turn over in just a couple of years. They start out with 80,000, they're selling for 200 million.
Yeah, so I think that one of the things that sometimes frustrates me, Rick, is I understand people, there are people out there that are still struggling. So when I say the economy is getting better, there will be people watching this show to say, what are you talking about? It hasn't affected, I don't see that affecting me. And I understand that, I really do, and we're sympathetic in the State House to that. Some people don't believe that, but we are. But we also know that we have to continue to invest in education, transportation, and some of those other areas to make sure that it works, so that we can, continue to have our economy build.
So how could some of those people, or are there programs that are going to be developed to help those people transition? I mean, some of them, I see a lot of them, as you know, and some of them are quite bright, but they don't know how to transition from where they are to a mid-level job, or to I've heard of people that identify themselves as engineering assistants, and they help in the development of some very interesting products. And I'm sure some of the people that I work with could actually do that work. But how do they transition?
There are programs that we have in the state. Again, the workforce training programs are not just for young workers. They're for older workers also that have changed, because careers are going to change as we go along, and people are going to have 3, 4, 5, 6 different jobs, and they're going to need constant retraining. We need to be able to do a better job of providing that for everyone. But there are programs out there now that will help in the retraining of workers. And I think the other thing that we need to be really conscious about is that there are, even though that we've seen some really, the economy has really worked well for those at the top, for those that are struggling, those at the bottom, they haven't seen those increases. There was something in the paper last week where salaries increased by 20% in Massachusetts for the top earners, for people in the financial areas and some of the other high businesses. But we didn't see that for your average worker. So as we still have a problem with the whole wage disparity, and some of the lower wage workers are not seeing and that's why I said that when people will look and listen to me say the economy's getting better, they'll say,
so how do you think that the state could add stability to that foundation? Because essentially they're the foundation of the country in a sense. The steel furnace is burned with the coal.
Rick, it's education, all right? We need to make sure that we provide our community colleges, make sure that they're affordable and they're accessible to not only our young men and women, but also for retraining programs. People may need to retrain. They should be able to go back and get credits in retraining, and it should be affordable. We need to make sure our higher education system is affordable. And because what we're finding is if you have a college education, your salaries are much higher.
Okay.
If you have if you at least have 2 years of colleges, you can compete for those middle skilled jobs. If you just have a high school education or your training is out of date, the ability to make money is look at the opportunities are not there. They're low wage working. There's plenty of low wage jobs out there, but they're not living wage jobs.
What about the vets? Because in my population, I see a lot of them, and they're just not making it.
Well, there's a lot of programs out there for the vets, and every single community has a veteran service agent. Burlington has a really good one, and Bob Hogan. They need to get in touch with their veteran service agents because there are opportunities out there and jobs out there and programs where we can help the vets. So they're going to school. They have opportunities to go to school to get the educations, to get the credits, and to get jobs. There are a lot of opportunities out there, but they have to go to the right place to get them. Okay.
How do you see the resurgence? I see a resurgence of the unions, and I see the resurgence in a good way in some ways, and in some ways frustrating. What do you see the role of the union in development of any comeback of the economy?
What we're seeing, we're seeing the unions having a comeback in some of the, mostly in the hospital industry. That's where you've seen the increase of unions.
Well, as a nurse, I have to say that in some of I read a lot of those articles, and there are some issues.
Right.
I mean,
right. Well, I think that's one of the, you have that, and you have certain industries where you have an increase. But again, I think that's helpful because the wages, is, in at least in those places, the wages have become from agreeable to somewhat livable wages, and we need to make sure that we have more people living on living wages. Let me just give you an example of a piece of legislation that I have filed. It's called the Responsible Contractor Bill. And what that means is if someone wants to contract and bid for a contract in Massachusetts, that when you look at it, if it's for public sector or state, they will take into consideration the wages that are paid plus the benefits that are given. And then the person that comes in at the best rate will get the contract. The reason I say that is because too many of the companies that come in will pay minimum wage, but will give no benefits.
Oh.
They will not have health insurance. They don't have any type of pension system or any other type of programs. Now, there are people that will say, well, why would that bother you? Why would that bother me? And the reason it does is because, Rick, when you pay someone minimum wage or not a livable wage, those same people are getting housing assistance. They're getting mass health, free health care from us, mass health, housing assistance, food stamps, and they have all of these programs that we're spending money for them to be able to live, when in fact, if we had responsible employers that could pay the wages, decent wages, livable wages, we wouldn't have to provide all
Right,
those
I see.
services. So the state pays.
Well, I think that's a great idea.
The
I
state
re-
pays
I really
one way
think
or
it's a
another.
great idea.
And what we're saying is, you know what? Why, if certain people at the very top are making that money, why not pay the people a living wage so that the average taxpayer doesn't have to support those
Right, because I
workers?
see a lot of guys that work construction, and they're from like May to September, they're doing great. Then all of a sudden, there's no work, there's nothing, and they're on, they're collecting unemployment
We
check.
need to figure out a better way to make sure that we can put people to work, make them have living wages, and have less people dependent on the state for those services. However, we need to make sure that we do that. Now, there's a lot of different I think that's the goal of everyone. It's my goal, and along with a lot of my colleagues, how we get there, Rick, is going to be the challenge.
Right, right. So, I mean, that sort of reflects the sort of that subpopulation of workers, the temp workers or contract workers. And I'm not saying that they're all part of the, the state's issue, but how do you see sort of correcting that in a state where, we have probably, we may have one of the oldest worker populations, but we probably also have one of the best educated worker populations.
We do.
So then you have to wonder, why are we temp employing people with PhDs?
Yeah, we do. We have one of the higher education, in some areas, and that becomes, again, the issue that concerns me. We need to make sure that we, continue to retrain and have the higher training levels so that we can replace those workers. The jobs are going to be there. We just don't have the qualified workforce. So that it all comes back to, we need to make sure that we have a qualified workforce to be able to put people to work, so that they can be less dependent on the state.
So one, I guess another issue that comes to mind is the enforcement of regulations, because if you read the Herald or the Globe on a regular basis, there's always one or two. They left the kid in the minivan and they didn't abide by the regulations. How do you see the state sort of revamping? That's what it seems like needs to happen to me. Is there needs to be some sort of reorientation to what's already there, as opposed to the creation of new. And it still lets people make new things. Do you know what I'm saying?
What we're trying to do in the state level is to take and ease off on some of the regulations that are no longer needed. And obviously, there are times when you do need, government to work.
Right.
We didn't do a very good job on, I didn't say we, but the healthcare didn't do a very good job on some of the laboratories, state laboratories,
Right.
the Hinton State Laboratory, the compounding agencies.
Right.
So we need regulation. We need to make
Right.
sure that we have some regulations to protect those areas. And then there are other regulations that sometimes can be prohibitive and harder to deal with when it comes to, doing zoning and building. And but we're working on that to make, to try to make sure that it's more business friendly.
Right.
As long as it makes sense.
What about like inventorying programs for regulations? Because there seems to be a lot of issues where you read like the recent fire, which had nothing to do with the state. It had to do with Boston. If they have a building that in 1982 turns over into a multifamily dwelling, and then they never inspect the building for whatever number of years, it would seem to me to be an issue that needs to...
Well, the only time, see what happens when the fire department kicks in to look at the smoke detectors, usually at seal, at time of seal.
Right.
So there's no provisions that will go in and look at someone's houses
Okay.
before there's a seal. So if someone owned that house
Right.
for a long period of time, there are no, you can't
Right.
just
They've
go in and
owned it for
inspect
a
it.
long period of time.
You can't just go in and inspect it.
Well, I want to thank you very much. I see our time is already expired, but I have a lot more questions, but you answered the ones very well. I really appreciate it. You passed the test,
Thanks.
I'm sure, for a lot of people.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rick. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.